Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Iran and Israel both claim victory as a Trump-backed brokered ceasefire halts days of airstrikes, but neither side backs down in words or posture. A US intelligence assessment reported by Reuters finds American strikes only delayed Iran's nuclear program by months and not destroyed it, as Trump claims. All 32 NATO leaders land in The Hague, with German Chancellor Merz calling the summit historic and focused on Europe's future security. Trump returns to his first NATO meeting since 2019, praised by Mark Rutte for securing a 5% defence spending pledge from every member. Israeli missiles strike a residential area in Gilan province hours before the ceasefire, killing 16 according to Iran's ISNA agency. The blast in the Ast-Ner-Ye'ash Rafia raises the death toll from an earlier count of 9, with civilians among the dead. At least 19 people have died in fresh Russian strikes on Ukraine as Zelensky pleads for more Western aid at the NATO summit in The Hague. With US military support set to expire, Ukraine faces new uncertainty while Moscow's attacks on civilian areas continue unrelented. The US approves $30 million for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, its first direct payment, despite officials of violence near aid hubs. Reuters reports the group, using US private firms, claims to have delivered 40 million meals across Gaza in just 1 month. Sean Diddy Coombs' lawyers wrap up their defence, claiming sexual freak-offs were consensual and backed by texts from accuser Cassie Ventura. Closing arguments in the sex trafficking trial began on Thursday as jurors prepare to decide the hip-hop mogul's fate. At least 10 people are dead and 15 are injured after a landslide strikes Antigua province, according to Governor Andres Julian. He says search and rescue teams are still working at the scene, with more victims possibly trapped. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo concedes defeat to left-wing challenger Zohran Mamdani in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary. The stunning upset marks a shift in city politics, with Mamdani surging on a progressive platform. We start with the Middle East, and a shaky ceasefire between Israel and Iran appears to be holding. After 12 days of war and a dramatic US airstrike campaign that now faces growing scrutiny. While Iran has arrested several for having ties with Israel and reportedly hanged 3 individuals for spying for the country, President Donald Trump announced the truce yesterday, saying he convinced both sides to stand down. But tensions remain high and claims of victory are being challenged. Trump declared that the US bunker buster bombs had, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear program. However, a leaked intelligence assessment says otherwise. According to a preliminary Defense Intelligence Agency report, the strikes only delayed Iran's nuclear activity by a few months, and not years, as Trump has suggested. The DIA says entrances to 2 sites were also sealed, but underground centrifuge halls were not destroyed. Stockpiles of enriched uranium remain largely untouched. The White House has rejected that assessment and called it a flat-out lie. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the leak was meant to discredit Trump and US plots. She insisted the mission was a success, saying monumental damage was inflicted. Trump posted online that the sites were completely destroyed. Still, questions linger. Iran's nuclear program, long suspected of military intent, may have survived with only minor setbacks. At the United Nations, the US and the strikes were lawful and self-defense and degraded Iran's nuclear capabilities. But European nations want more diplomacy and not bombs. France warned it may snap back sanctions if Iran doesn't return to talks. Britain has also urged Tehran to prove its program is peaceful. Iran's UN ambassador says the attacks proved only one thing: diplomacy remains the only way forward. President Pezeshkian called the ceasefire a great victory and said Iran is open to resolving issues with the United States and Gulf nations. Israel, meanwhile, has said it had removed the nuclear threat and would act again if Iran restarts its program. Let's listen in to Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel's statements.
ואכן, בכל הפעולות המזהירות שלוחמינו ביצעו, הורדנו לטמיון את פרויקט הגרעין של איראן. ואם מישהו באיראן ינסה לשקם את הפרויקט הזה, נפעל באותה נחישות, באותה עוצמה, לגדוע כל ניסיון כזה.
Earlier, Prime Minister Netanyahu praised Trump, calling him Israel's greatest ally in history. He said Israel's mission is unfinished, pointing to the war in Gaza. Both Iran and Israel have claimed victory. Both also accuse each other of violating the ceasefire, though no new attacks have been reported since Tuesday. Trump has scolded both sides, particularly Israel, for escalating after the truce was announced. He said they've fought so long they don't know what they're doing. Despite mutual distrust, Trump's intervention seems to have paused the fighting for now. His envoy says back-channel talks with Iran are promising. As world markets recover and airspace begins reopening, one question looms large. Can this ceasefire really hold, or is it just a temporary pause? We're now joined by Jim Rice, who's a professor of international law, to discuss this in more detail. He joins us live from Vigan, the Philippines. Jim, this ceasefire is seeming to hold, as we've said, for now, are the words, but given the rhetoric around the kind of press that these leaders are doing, what are your thoughts? Do you think this ceasefire is going to hold?
It's impossible to speculate at this point. Thanks for having me on, Thomas. However, chances are it won't. I mean, if I was, forced to speculate, I would say that inevitably there will be breaches of the ceasefire.
And Jim, what are your thoughts on Donald Trump's visible anger with both sides, but particularly Israel? We saw him use a curse word yesterday. First time we've actually heard him do so in that type of manner as president, showing clear frustration with, as Benjamin Netanyahu says, Israel's closest ally. What are your thoughts on Donald Trump's current stance on Israel? Do you think he's getting fed up?
Well, I had to smile when you slightly edited Trump's comments. I have never in my life heard a U.S. president use such language, certainly not in public. And to me, it's really an indication that Trump is not only frustrated, but he's a bit unhinged. One of the things that's the most concerning to us is the manner in which only hours after, minutes actually, after the bombing mission had taken place, Trump got on the television or got on his tweet and said that Iranian nuclear facilities have been completely obliterated, when he could have had no idea as to the nature and the extent of the damage. And then, of course, we find out later that the Defense Intelligence Agency, in a leaked statement, indicated that not only was it not obliterated, it only really delays the Iranian efforts to enrich uranium by a few months. And then, of course, we have the North Korean style statement by Caroline Leavitt, which basically says that this is all designed in order to discredit Trump. So I would say it's beyond frustration, Thomas.
Yes, obviously we've spoken about that briefly. The fact that Donald Trump says that this assessment done by the United States, by the way, was completely wrong, and that he knew better and that the program had been destroyed. Moving on down the line, how is this going to possibly come back at the US president?
Thanks for that question. What people need to know at this point is this is Trump's war. He owns this now. And I think he's even referred to this as his perfect war. So when and if this starts to go wrong, Trump will own all of this. And I'm sure that since Trump never takes responsibility for anything that he does, I'm sure he'll try to deflect. But this is on him.
Jim Rice, thank you very, very much for joining us on the program. We stay in the Middle East for our next story, where 7 Israeli soldiers were killed during fighting in the southern Gaza Strip. Israeli media reported the 7 were killed in the city of Khan Yunis when an explosive device planted on their vehicle detonated, setting it on fire. Meanwhile, the United States is giving $30 million to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the aid group operating in war-torn Gaza, despite concerns from some US officials about the month-old operation in the Strip and the violence reported near food distribution sites. The funding was authorized under a priority directive from the White House and State Department, with an initial $7 million already being dispersed. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation uses American private military and logistics firms to distribute aid and has been exempt from usual audits and vetting required for aid operations in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli military's chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, said that the military focus is now returning to Gaza to bring back hostages and dismantle Hamas's rule, following the recent war with Iran. In a separate development, Gaza's Civil Defense Agency reported that 46 people were killed while waiting for aid in separate incidents in central and southern Gaza. Now we turn to Europe, where NATO leaders have gathered in The Hague for a crucial summit, with defence spending taking centre stage. Allies are expected to back a new target of 5% of GDP, a key demand by US President Donald Trump, as global security threats intensify. Meanwhile, Trump, ahead of the NATO summit, says he's ready to face a new set of problems, but he's stopping short of backing NATO's core defence pledge. Trump called Article 5 of NATO open to numerous definitions, saying he's committed to friendship, helping allies and saving lives. He promised to explain his position, but not on the back of an airplane. Let's take a listen in to what Trump said.
Now we're going to NATO, and we'll get a new set of problems. We'll solve a new set of problems. Numerous definitions of Article 5, you know that, right? But I'm committed to being their friends. You know, I've become friends with many of those leaders, and I'm committed to helping them.
Meanwhile, the summit began with a formal dinner hosted by the Dutch royal family, followed by a group photo ahead of the high-stakes talks. Mark Rutte has kept the summit focused on spending and even accepting a diplomatic compromise with Spain, which opposes the 5% target. Rutte also privately praised Trump for his decisive action in Iran, seeking to keep President Trump engaged. Let's take a listen in to what Mark Rutte said.
Today, I am pleased to announce that NATO has already added an additional $1 trillion in defense spending over the past decade. Mr. President, dear Donald, that is thanks to you pushing us. And tomorrow we will build on that foundation and add trillions more in defense spending, because we need to do this.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking on the sidelines, warned that Putin only thinks about war and held bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron to rally support. Zelensky attended a pre-summit dinner and he's hoping to secure more weapons and tougher sanctions on Moscow. Meanwhile, the Kremlin accused NATO of militarizing Europe and using Russia as a scare tactic to justify defense hikes. In a major defense announcement, the United Kingdom confirmed plans to reintroduce nuclear-capable aircraft under NATO command, signaling a significant military upgrade and amid escalating regional tensions. Meanwhile, President Trump also met Turkish President Erdogan on the sidelines of the NATO summit, calling for deeper cooperation in defence. Erdogan said boosting defence ties could help reach $100 billion in trade deficit target between Turkey and the United States. He also stressed the two countries have a strong potential in energy and in investment sectors. We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, who's a fellow at the Hudson Institute located in Tokyo, Japan, to discuss this in more detail. Dr. Nagao, thank you very much for joining us. This NATO summit has kicked off. There's been a lot of talks on the group fracturing. Do you think, what do you think of the state of NATO right now, the discourse between the countries? Is it becoming more and more divided with a more politically unstable world?
Yes, of course, the answer is yes and no in this case. But simply said, European increasing their defense budget is welcome news. Because lack of the budget, NATO cannot be strong, and without the image of the strength, they cannot maintain their organization. Because NATO is strong enough to deter Russia or as a threat, that's why people want to join NATO. So without this, they cannot be strong. So that's why the increasing the defense budget itself is very welcome news. A little bit concern is that this time, originally the NATO inviting the three leaders of the three nations located in the Pacific: Japan, South Korea, and Australia. But all of three canceled to visit the NATO summit. Because most of the NATO countries agreed to increase their defense budget to the 5% of the GDP. But same demand came from the United States, but three countries in the Indo-Pacific cannot increase their defense budget to such kind of the high level. 5% is one kind of the dream that these three countries believe. So under such kind of situation, these three countries cannot join the NATO summit. But without these countries, NATO cannot interest in China. So that's why to deal with the rising China, coordination between the Asian ally and NATO, all of these US circles should coordinate their move. They should integrate their move. But in this NATO summit, they cannot show such kind of message to the world. That is wrong part, unfortunate part.
Yes, and Dr. Nagao, what do you think on Donald Trump's stance on NATO? Some analysts are saying this summit is all about him and his demands. Donald Trump was very outspoken about the need for the rest of the NATO members to up their defense spending, and now it seems to have happened, apart from Spain, who have signed that deal. Before he arrived, he said he was going to NATO to face a new set of problems. What do you think of Donald Trump's stance on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization?
Bill Grom's increasing the defense budget of the European country, he succeeded because this demand originally came from the end of the Obama administration. So first Trump administration, Biden administration, now second Trump administration. It has reached now. This means that Trump's push contributes a lot. But to persuade the European country, United States stance is we cannot protect you. This message is a little bit controversial. Yes, he succeeded to persuade Europe to increase the defense budget, but at the same time, he needs to recover the trust again in the later. So that is homework for him in the future, I believe.
We also saw Zelensky at the NATO summit, Dr. Nagao, and he's warned that he's continued to ask for sanctions on Moscow, and obviously he's continued his rhetoric about Putin wanting to continue this now 3-year war. What are your thoughts on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's presence on the sidelines of the NATO summit?
Ukraine's presence is a very good thing, I think. And at the same time, President Trump hasn't gave up to seek the ceasefire in Russia and Ukraine just now. So that's why he hasn't imposed a very strong sanction against Russia just now. But when the sanction comes, this means that President Trump gave up this. Generally, most of the war duration is 4 years. And this year is 3rd year, and we are entering 4th year. So, built from this pattern in the past, there is a possibility we'll fight 1 more year. So that's why there's a possibility in the future the U.S. agree to impose a more stronger sanction against Russia, I believe. Thank you.
Dr. Satoru Nagao, thank you very much as always for joining us on the program. We now move to Europe. We stay in Europe, where at least 19 people were killed and nearly 300 have been wounded after Russian missiles struck Ukraine's central Dnipropetrovsk region, according to local officials. Governor Sergei Lysak said 17 people were killed in the city of Dnipro, while 2 others died in the town of Sama. Police said an administrative building, schools, shops and a children's hospital were among the targets damaged in the strikes. The attack comes as Russian forces claim to have reached the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, currently in the Netherlands for meetings on the sidelines of a NATO summit, has condemned the strikes as an attempt by Moscow to destroy lives and blackmail the West. We move over to the United States now, where former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has officially conceded the Democratic mayoral primary to progressive challenger Zohran Mamdani, with 90% of the ballots counted. Mamdani holds a commanding lead, securing 43% of the vote. Cuomo addressed his supporters at an election night event, saying tonight was not our night. He confirmed he called Mamdani to congratulate him on his win. This marks a major political comeback for Mamdani, who ran on a platform of promising housing reform, climate action and police accountability. For Cuomo, this loss represents a stumbling block in his attempt to return to political office after his 2021 resignation. Let's listen in to what the former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo had to say.
And I'm very proud of the campaign that we ran, and I'm proud of the effort that we put forth, and I'm proud of the issues that we discussed. But tonight was not our night. Tonight was Assemblyman Mamdani's night. I called him, I congratulated him, I applaud him sincerely for his effort, and let's give him a round of applause and thank him for his campaign.
We move on once again. A groundbreaking international mission is heading into space this week, marking a historic return for India, Poland and Hungary to crew spaceflight after decades. Axiom Mission 4, or AX-4, lifts off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida early on Wednesday aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. The crew includes Shubhanshu Shukla from India, Slolwals Unsaki from Poland and Tibor Kapu from Hungary, and American Commander Peggy Whitson. They'll spend up to 14 days aboard the International Space Station, conducting over 60 scientific experiments. For Shukla, this flight marks India's first human space mission since 1984, and a key step towards ISRO's planned Gaganyaan mission in 2027. The mission comes amid a public spat between US President Donald Trump and Elon Musk, which briefly threatened SpaceX's government ties. The AX-4 4 launched, featuring the final Crew Dragon capsule, goes ahead as planned with strong backing from participating nations. Now we move to South America, where at least 10 people have been killed and 15 have been injured after a landslide triggered by heavy rain struck near the Colombian city of Medellin. The slide occurred in the municipality of Belo, where authorities had earlier warned locals to evacuate due to landslide risks. The landslide followed flooding in a nearby ravine. Antigua's governor confirmed the casualties. Rescue teams and locals are continuing to search for survivors. Now we move on to the Indo-Pacific. More than 80,000 people have been forced to flee their homes due to severe flooding in China's southwestern province, according to state media. Rescue teams have been deployed to the hardest hit areas, where authorities have raised the flood emergency response to the highest level. China is currently grappling with extreme weather, including scorching heat in Beijing and further flooding in Hunan province last week. Well, that is all we have time for, and we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.